Good evening, everybody. My name is Salesh Mehra. I'm with the city. I'm the chief city planner. Welcome tonight. We've got an exciting evening for you. So Dave is going to get into the exact reasons why you're here and what the general plan is. But very topically, before we get started, I first want to introduce my colleagues. We've got city planners from the city. We've got our staff extensions or consultants that are working for the city on this. Dave and his team, Lisa, and then Billy, one of our staff planners, and our assistant city manager is here, Sharon, and our director of economic and community development, Alex Greenwood's here. And who else am I missing? We've got Planning Commissioner Bernardo and CAC members and school board members. So I will hand it off to Dave, and he'll kind of walk you through what the general plan is and what we hope to achieve in the next several months. So thank you again for coming.
This way. Thank you, Salesh. Hi again, my name is Dave Javid. I'm with Plan to Place. We have Patricia here with me as well. We're going to help guide you through tonight's discussion. Thank you again for being here with us. Essentially, we're here, as Salesh mentioned, to give you a short overview of what the general plan is, how long the process is, and again, how important your input is to make sure that this process is all inclusive and includes your vision, objectives, and goals. And with that, we're going to have a very small group discussion. We'll probably have 2 groups up here, really walking you through an exercise to understand what you love about the city, what some of the challenges might be, what opportunities for change there might be, and then that will get fed into this overall process moving forward. And it'll include a small report back after that, so we'll have each group stand up so we can hear what others said, and then I'll walk you through a couple next steps as to where we're headed from here. So with that, we've been starting these meetings with a short icebreaker. Obviously, we have a small room here, but if we could just take a couple minutes for you to share with your neighbor next to you, hopefully someone that you haven't had a chance to speak to in the past, and let us know what your story is about South San Francisco, how you landed here, why you live here, what you love about it, and what some of the places and events are that you particularly gravitate towards. So we'll have a couple minutes discussion at your tables, and then I'll ask a couple people to share that, and then we'll jump right into the presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to you all to have a discussion.
Hi, my name is Edith Arias, and I came to South San Francisco because my oldest son, I have 3 kids, and my oldest son actually needed a special program for kids with special needs. So we were living in Daly City, previous to that to San Francisco, and in 2003, we found the class that he needed at Ponderosa Elementary. So he started there his 4th grade, and once he was accepted, I had to drive from Daly City to here every day. I had to drive him. So that was the time when I decided to, we needed to move. So that's how we got to South San Francisco. But in South San Francisco, we got the opportunity to live in the housing authority. So 3 kids, husband and wife really help. And while we're doing that, we also apply for Habitat for Humanity. So South San Francisco City Council was very generous to accept Habitat for Humanity here. There's 4 houses, and one of those is my blessing and my family's blessing. So that was 2008 when we got the house. So lived since then here. And definitely a story about South San Francisco. My kids been raised here. Park and Recreations had been there, where they formed friends, baseball. Myself, we volunteer in the city, so we have had a great experience, and that's why I'm very proud to always say that I'm a South San Francisco citizen.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Edith. Anyone else willing to share their story? Joanne, would you like to share? Great.
So my name is Joanne Calvert, and I'm one of the old timers. So born and raised in San Francisco, third generation San Franciscan, and we couldn't afford a house in 1960 in San Francisco, and we resigned ourselves to coming down to South San Francisco, a big move. And at first, I really missed the city. I was just a city girl, missed the city. But slowly, I got to be more comfortable here. And we have 3 daughters, and they all went through South San Francisco schools. I became involved in PTA and district stuff. And so it just felt more and more comfortable here. And so from 1960 to the present time, I've been in South San Francisco and consider myself very lucky and fortunate. I was really blessed to be able to sell my house and move into Rotary Terrace, just about a block and a half away. And I didn't think that could be possible, but I was very, very fortunate. And I have some wonderful neighbors there, including Rosa, who's one of my neighbors. And it's a wonderful community, very supportive manager, and just really trying to form a nice community of people there. So that continues. I'm happy to be able to do some volunteer work at Magnolia, and it's been a blessing for me. I do senior yoga class there now it's going on 6 years, so it's been so helpful for me, and people that have come have been happy with that too. So very, very pleased. Of course, now I'm looking at increased traffic, population density. Doesn't bother me so much. The traffic is a little bit more of an issue. And so I'm hoping that the planners here can figure out some way to make this a little bit easier. But it's a great place to live, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Thank you very much for that. Eddie, do you want to share your quick story here, and then we'll jump right in? This is very helpful. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Eddie Flores. Buenas noches. I'm actually elected here in South San Francisco as school board member. I represent the school board district at large. My story is pretty unique because, believe it or not, I always knew about South San Francisco. I actually graduated from Westmore in Daly City. So my story of knowing schools in the neighborhood and friends and making, acquaintances was because I was heavily involved in sports. At that time, my family lived in Daly City, having relocated from the Mission District in San Francisco and whatnot. But what was really unique is that I spent most of my time here, even though I went to school in Westmore at Daly City, here with my El Camino counterparts, because I had built friendships with other athletes and whatnot. So that really came to light afterwards when we would play soccer at Orange Park and my family would get together. And soon after, I found that my relatives and, uncles and aunts and cousins started relocating here. Because of work and whatnot, I had to travel to the East Coast, but I was able to have an opportunity to select a city of employment at the time where I was working, and they said, you could pick any city in the Bay Area and we'll pay for relocation and whatnot. And at that time, I remembered my roots back from high school, right? I really wanted to focus on a school that was, on a city that was close by, and obviously because I did a lot of travel, somewhere close to SFO. So that brought me back here about 10, 11 years ago. And I was sharing with the table that, even throughout the course of all these years, there's signature things that really make it so unique for us here in South San Francisco, including obviously Orange Park, which is our signature, most memorable park for all of us that we can identify, as well as our City Hall. And how much we have preserved. And we were having, a discussion of how much we more need to work on making sure that it does not get changed, right? That we do preserve the uniqueness of what that City Hall in the Grand Avenue corridor is. But I think what we can all agree is that we have so many resources. And that's one thing that we brought up at our table. Our Parks and Recreation Department, right? In and of itself, I think it was mentioned, our great schools were thriving ensuring we're supporting each other's resources with our thriving young community, with our Boys and Girls Club and all the various resources that we have. And I think that's something that needs to be said for, with all this development and all this continuous, growth, we are preserving and we're remembering what's important, and that's the lives of the young ones. And as we shape South San Francisco, we need to remember that it's for those younger generations that we got to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. And thank you all. This is exactly why we're here tonight, and we're going to continue to have these discussions. Is we want you to reflect on what's great about the city, and again, maybe what changes are needed. But ultimately, this plan is yours, and it's something that's going to grow out of the vision and thoughtfulness that you all have. And just a quick overview of what a general plan is. It's essentially an overarching policy document, which means it's going to set the course for the next 20 to 25 years with objectives, with goals, with vision statements that are going to help guide both what happens on the ground, buildings, the character, and the maybe not necessarily look and feel, but the type of uses from residential to commercial to office, where those maybe should be located. It's going to think about transportation generally and how that could be improved potentially in the area. It's going to think about your open spaces and parks, the services that are needed. All of these important things that help a city run are going to be included in this general plan and help guide the future of the city. And the general plan is a document that's actually mandated by the state. It's something that has to be updated essentially every 20 to 25 years. Every city goes through it to make sure that it's meeting some of the latest statutes and laws, but then also is addressing things that are coming up that weren't evident 20 years ago, like climate change and sea level rise and sustainability and environmental equity. Those things weren't necessarily thought about back 20 years ago when this was originally written. So it needs to be refreshed and updated to include those things, but then most importantly, make sure that it's addressing a lot of the concerns and topics that you all have. And again, as Eddie mentioned, you all mentioned, preserving what's great about South San Francisco. So this is a very long 2-year effort, so there's going to be many opportunities to feed into the process, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But again, the ultimate goal is to create that shared vision that you all can agree on, and we can help move forward with the objectives that come out of the process. So with that, the general plan is one of many documents, but it is kind of the overarching document that everything else filters up into. There's been a lot of different planning efforts. This is just a sample of a few that have happened over the past 10, 15, 20 years that will then be reflected back up in the general plan. But just wanted to assure you that it's not a document that stands alone. It takes all the great work before it and moves it forward. And this is, again, just an example of some of the planning efforts, from studies to specific plans to transportation plans that address multiple different areas throughout the city. This general plan will help, again, filter that information up. As I mentioned, this is about a 2-year process. This larger star here, if you can see it, is where we are. So we're very, very much at the beginning of this process. These boxes here identify the key deliverables that are going to be coming out through this process, starting with what we're doing here, and idea sharing and sharing your information with us so that we can move that forward into what we're calling a vision or major strategies. That again will kind of set the course for what you all want to see, what you want to see preserved, what needs to be addressed. That'll move into different formats. Land use alternatives will show, again, the different type of uses, from residential to parks to retail to office, and where that could be located. And at every point in this process, that information will be brought back to the community to make sure that you all have an opportunity to provide input. And that's what these larger stars represent, is that we've had that feedback loop with you all throughout the process, again, to make sure that it's reflecting your vision for the future. And again, we're shooting for 2022 as a kind of an end date. So again, about a 2-year process, essentially. And we'll be coming back to you with more information about this moving forward, but just wanted to give you a kind of an overarching idea of the overall timeline for the project itself. So the first step in this process is doing existing conditions analysis. So that's the quantitative piece of doing analysis of what's on the ground currently and understanding what the conditions are. So we looked at everything from demographics to transportation analysis to different land use analyses. And as part of that, that will be kind of balanced with all this great qualitative data that we get from you all in the conversations. This is some of the demographic information that's been bubbling up as we've kind of gone through the process. We know that there is approximately 67,000 residents in South San Francisco, which represents about 9% of the entire county of San Mateo live here in South San Francisco. We know that there's been a big jump, a 24% increase in residents since 1990, which is reflected in about 2,100 housing units that have been built during that time. And that is, again, it's showing that there has been an upward trend in the folks that are moving here because they're realizing it's a great place to be. But we also have to look at different dynamics of kind of who's been able to live here. Yes, did you have a quick question?
Is there any other city in the county that has such a large population growth in the past 30 years?
Is there any other city in the county that has similar population growth since 1990? That's a fantastic question. I'm sure there's some that kind of mirror this percentage-wise, especially in the surrounding areas. I've worked in San Mateo and Redwood City and other surrounding communities that also have had that similar boom. So I would say, yeah, that's probably reflective of a lot of what's going on around the county for sure. So I'm sorry if you didn't hear his question. He was asking if this increase in population is reflective of other cities within the county, and I think it is. Generally, it does fit that mold. So this is an interesting thing about of what we're calling the evolving age of the community. We found that the younger generation, those 18 and younger, there hasn't been much of an increase at all since 1990. In fact, there's been a little bit of a dip. Overall, about a 1% increase in the youth population. And on the other end of the spectrum, the aging population, or 65 and older, there's been a huge increase of about 70% in that same time frame. So a lot of folks aging in place, moving to assisted living areas, and we need to recognize that it is an aging population. And as moving forward, some of the policies and objectives and opportunities, we need to make sure reflects that. But then we definitely don't want to forget about the younger population and their needs as well. We want to make sure that those voices are heard at the same time and hopefully attract more younger families potentially as well. So that data was really interesting in itself. And that's also reflected in household type. So these numbers reflect the increase in what we're calling multi-generational, or number of people actually living within each home has generally increased from 2.9 people per household to about 3.2 people per household. So a slight increase in the number of people that are actually within the same home of about 11%. That includes people that are roommates and or just, again, multi-generational families that are living together because of the affordability crisis and the need for housing in the area. Did you have a quick question? Where the data came from? This data came from census data that was available in 2010 and then updated again in 2017 through what's called the American Community Survey. So it's as of 2017, that's where most of this data came from, which is reflective of most cities until we get to the 2020 census. This is the latest information that we have to work with. Yeah. What was that? The number seems low. Yeah, I mean, that's in a lot of cases that's true because that does happen often. It was a mention that seems very low. It's because this doesn't necessarily reflect all the reporting that needs to be done. Not everyone reports the actual situation when a census data is taken for multiple reasons. They don't maybe kind of fill out the form when it's sent to them. So you're right. It probably is essentially higher than this, but this is the numbers, the data that's available that we're working with. But that's part of the discussion we want to have tonight about what some of those issues are and what we need to address moving forward. So I'm glad you brought that up. So this slide reflects the race and ethnicity citywide. Each one of these individual squares, essentially 1%, there's 100 squares, and this is color-coded just for ease of reference, but this shows the dark blue is Asian or Pacific Islander citywide. From 1990 has gone up from 23% of the total population to 41%. That was actually the biggest jump citywide. Not far behind was the Hispanic or Latino population that's reflected in this light blue that jumped from 27% up to 34%. And that's actually pretty consistent since 2010, that percentage. And then conversely, what's considered the white population has actually decreased considerably from 45% in 1990 to 19% of the total population. So as is reflected by the diversity here and within your community, these are interesting numbers to see that the community has in general definitely become diversified. And that's something that needs to be reflected again moving forward to make sure all needs are met. And in fact, that's why we have interpreters and information translated every meeting that we're going to, is we want to make sure that we have all this information that's accessible for everyone and that everyone has an opportunity to contribute to the process. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that's reflected here within the downtown area as well. But that's also reflected here in these numbers about language spoken at home. There's been about a 10% increase since 1990 in foreign-born folks that are living within the city. And then at home, that's reflected in that about 58% of the language spoken at home is actually a language other than English. So whether that's Tagalog or Mandarin or Spanish, there seems to be a big shift that's happened during that time, and that 39% of folks claim that they do not speak English very well in 2017. So again, that's something that we have to be very aware of as we move forward in this process, and the information that's available, make sure that it's reflected in these numbers and the needs that we need to meet. So in terms of the downtown itself, so now we're looking at this downtown sub area and some of the demographics that relate to that. This is a very similar graphic I showed earlier of each one of these squares representing the different demographic types. Again, with the Asian or Pacific Islander in the downtown area, as opposed to citywide, not as high as percentage, but a big jump, as you can see here, in the Hispanic Latino, 68%, close to 70% of the population here in the downtown area is either Hispanic or Latino, followed by Asian or Pacific Islander. So that number is essentially flipped from what the citywide numbers are. So as many of you know, a large population of Hispanic and Latino folks here in the downtown area. And then in terms of how that breaks out between the youth and the elderly, interestingly enough, there's actually a higher percentage of that total that are under 18, 26% of the total, as opposed to 20% of the total citywide are actually under 18, and only 10% actually a lower population of those that are 65 or older, as opposed to the citywide number of 15%. So we thought that was kind of an interesting fact as well, that those are actually swapped as opposed to what we look at citywide. And the total population is around 12,100. Again, sorry about this cutoff, but makes up about 20% of the citywide population, again, here in the downtown area, which again, we thought was very interesting to see. So in terms of, we looked at as well the number of housing units, 3,500 housing units, about, again, 17% total of the citywide number. As many of you know, the park number is fairly low, about 1.6 acres of parkland or open space, which equates to about 0.1 park acres per 1,000 residents, which is actually very low when you compare it to the citywide number of 3.7 acres per 1,000 residents. But that actually, so I mean, we know that the people per household number is a little bit higher here than it is citywide. But interestingly enough, because of where the pocket parks and the larger Orange Park is located, there's typically a walkable time frame or distance that we look at, which is a quarter mile. In our analysis of the area, it shows that 100%, so everyone that lives in the downtown area is within walking distance of a park. But again, a park is also considered a neighborhood park or a small pocket park that might not have all the same recreational resources like an Orange Park. As we can see reflected here in this map, this shows the overall downtown area, and these land uses are reflected again here, that shows that about half the land uses are single family. All this yellow is single family residential, so single homes. There's about 16, or let's say about 28% that are multifamily, so between duplexes and triplexes and other type of uses are reflected in the darker orange and brown. 9% or about 10% retail. And then that park number, again, we have Orange Memorial Park here that definitely this area might be in walking distance too, but then there's only a spattering of smaller pocket parks that represent the makeup of the other types of open space that are in the area that reflected in that number. So something to consider as we're having these conversations and we're talking about resources and type of uses in the area, where we might want those located in the downtown area. It would be great to hear from you all. So I think that takes us to the questions. We already had a couple questions pop up, and we could definitely answer a lot of questions in the small group discussion, but is there anything else that I could help answer before we transition to the small group discussion for you all? Anything that came up that you have any other questions about?
Is there a comparison of density downtown versus the rest of the city?
Comparison of density in downtown versus the rest of the city. I don't know if we have specific density calculations yet, but we will be doing a deep dive in the land use analysis section, and that's coming up actually in the next phase as we do our existing condition analysis, and those numbers will definitely be reflected in that. We'll look at density, we'll look at what's called floor area ratio, or FAR, to see kind of how that compares downtown versus the other areas in the city. Do you want to? Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Diana. I'm the one that crunched a lot of the numbers you saw there. One of the things we did see is for each sub-area meeting that we're having, we're showing similar demographics. And one of the things that we did notice is that 12,000 estimate of like the population in downtown is pretty similar to the number in like Westboro. And Westboro is like a much larger area, like when you look at land-wise. And so that helps us see that downtown is a lot more dense. And as Dave mentioned, when we start looking at more land use analysis, we'll be looking at that because smaller buildings, or you have a lot more housing together. And so we'll definitely be giving more information on that.
Thank you, Diana. Any other questions? Yes. Sure. Uh-huh.
So this is a city organization?
Shape SSF, I'm sorry, I should have been a little clear about that. That's the kind of the moniker or the phrase we came up with that reflects this entire planning process and is reflected both in all the language that you'll see. That's kind of the symbol. So that Shape SSF is the general plan process. It's called Shape SSF. That is going to be kind of reflected in the general plan on the website, and it is a city-run process. Yes, it's completely run through the city, and we here as consultants to help support that process. Did I help answer your question? I don't know. Yeah.
I know that there's been a lot of people recently involved in like PVC projects.
Uh-huh. Sure. Yeah, so the question is there a specific government body that is leading this process, or which kind of department within the city is helping lead this process? And actually, I could probably answer that, but I'm going to let Billy go ahead and answer that from the city.
One of the things I want to say is a general plan is a requirement for every city. And so it's a state mandate. We have to look every 20 years at, it kind of is our, you could say, a development Bible. Like, what's the vision of how the city wants to develop? And so we have to look at land use, have to look at transportation. As part of that, this is being run, or I should not run, managed by the city manager's office, but it's more of because it's going to affect every department that we have. We're going to be looking at public services. So what are our, do we have enough fire services, police? Are there issues for them from a transportation standpoint, from getting point A to point B? And so because it's going to touch pretty much all of the different areas, it's being managed by the city manager's office because he's kind of oversees all of those. From a process standpoint, this is the beginning. What we're trying to do now is just trying to get what's kind of the feeling of the things that are going well for the city. What do people not like? And part of it with some of the different sub-area meetings is a lot of times we're looking at things in a much more big picture. We also want people to look at, here's your specific neighborhoods. Are there things that you like or dislike even in your specific neighborhoods? We'll get into some policy level discussion for the neighborhoods as well as citywide. From a approval standpoint, we'll go through the kind of the city context, but ultimately we would go through planning commission for a recommendation, city council who approves and adopts the general plan. But that adoption is 2 years probably away. So it's a long process through that. Does that answer your question? Okay. Oh, yeah, yes. And so thank you for that. We do have a citizens advisory committee. So the city council chose a representative from each one of the city council districts, one of the residential areas. There are members of the planning commission, park and rec commission, the school board, 2 members of a large business community, one for the small. So we're trying to find how can we get a good cross section of all the different interests, so we can get what are their concerns, what are the things they love about South San Francisco, what are the things they don't like. That should all come together to hopefully let us know kind of what direction we want to go with all of this.
Great point. Thank you. Did you want to add to that, Alex?
Hi, I'm Alex Greenwood. I'm the director of the ECD Department, Economic Community Development. I'm going to be as brief as I can. I know there's a lot to go through tonight, and we want to really hear from you, not me. But that was the last comment was, I thought, a really good point, and I just want to acknowledge it. If you look at what's happening at the local level, at the federal level, now is a really easy time to get really cynical and disillusioned and to think, like, am I really wasting my time here? Do I make a difference in government? I just want to tell you that on behalf of my staff and all of City Hall, we really do care about this community, and we want to work hard to see if this can be an honest discussion about the community we want to create. I also just want to admit up front, South San Francisco, like every city in the Bay Area, is subject to some pretty huge macro forces. And so there's some factors we just can't control. We can't control all of the huge development pressure that's coming up from the south, from Silicon Valley and down from San Francisco. That impacts our city, and it's going to force our city to change. And another thing that's happened recently is the state government has passed some laws that have really limited our ability to control our own development policies. So we can't control everything, and sometimes it may seem like we're ignoring you or that not every part of your input is being taken into account, but we're going to try. And our commitment is to have an honest dialogue with you, our residents. So with that, I'll turn it back.
Thank you very much, Alex and Billy. Yeah, and we'll go through as part of the next steps. It's probably a good idea to mention it here as well, but this is one of many different avenues to provide input in this process. We're going to be having other meetings going out to the community at events that are happening at churches, in the parks, the Concerts in the Park series coming up. There'll be online resources for people to plug in there. So, and everything that is being talked about here, where facilitators are going to be recording it, and that'll be posted back up to the website. Every single summary, all this discussion, we have this video. So we want to make sure that all this information is captured and shared back with everyone else as well to create a fully transparent process. So again, thank you for that great question. And with that, as we mentioned, we're really here to hear from you, not for me or anyone else to be talking. So I want to break out into this small group discussion, and it looks like we have about 3 groups here, unless you all want to help populate a couple tables here. But you're going to have facilitators at each table. We have Diana and Patricia as part of the consultant team, and again, Billy, Tony, Lisa, Sharon, Alex, all of us are here as well to help facilitate this discussion. And what we really want to do is, one, introduce yourself. Again, this is a chance to get to know your neighbors, your colleagues, have that connection. And then we want to ask you a series of questions to really kind of dive deeper into understanding what you're passionate about, what things, again, you'd like to see changed. And this is a horrible wall to reflect on, but the first question is why did you move to your neighborhood? Kind of reflecting back on the story we talked about earlier. And your facilitators will walk you through this. What do you love about your neighborhood? So we're going to be thinking a lot about kind of citywide policies and perspectives, but we'd love to hear about what you love about the neighborhood that you're in. What is it that brought you there? Why are you still there? What makes it special? And then what things you think could be improved? What do you maybe like least about your neighborhood? What areas do you see that could be changed? And then ultimately, we want you to think into the future, 10, 15, 20 years from now. what, if you're still living and working in the area, what do you envision this place to be? And this is kind of what we're talking about, the visioning for the future. What, if you, in your wildest dreams, what would be the best case scenario of your neighborhood? What would you like it to turn into if it's not there already? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to your facilitators to run you through this exercise. We'll do this for about 20 minutes. Then we'll come back so that you can help share that information back out with the rest of the group. And then I'll walk you through a couple next steps, and we'll send you on your way. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and now do a quick report out of all this great conversations that we've been having. We want to make sure that everyone here could hear some of the key themes that arose out of each one of the discussions.
Here's my exercise in brevity. Okay, number one, why did you move to the neighborhood? The answers that went around in our table are to move out of the fog, access to services, proximity to family and work, access to BART, transportation access, walkable to services. And I love this one, love the wind and the views of the peninsula. Okay, question two, what do you love about your neighborhood? What makes it unique and special? Weather, no fog, nice breeze. I really like that one. Food, restaurants, signature restaurants, sense of pride, unique character, San Bruno Mountain, Bay Trail, the parks. What are the things you like least about your neighborhood, and what would you change? More retail options locally to keep people local. Beautify the park with sorry, I can't read this one. Well, anyway, beautify the park. The existing train station, make it safer. Senior assisted facility, independent senior progressive care facilities, more trees, more greenery, access to healthy foods. And let's see, I think that was it for that. And then lastly, imagine yourself living or working in South San Francisco in 20 years. What would you want to see in your neighborhood? Let's see, healthy food options, beautiful parks, use of Grand Avenue for local events and festivals, more play areas around City Hall, Town Hall, new Caltrans station, Caltrans station, that's hard to say. Walkable trails, town square, services to senior, more childcare, daycare options that are walkable, and trails. That's what I have. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Do we have a representative of this table like to step up? Here we go, Joanne.
Well, we could have probably gone on for a lot longer. It was a, real nice discussion at this table. And why did you move to your neighborhood? So number one was affordable. I think that was really high on everybody's list. That it was quiet compared to San Francisco. People felt that South San Francisco was quieter. That there were the parks, and other people too, close to parks, libraries, schools, church. So these things were really important for us. That it was also a place where there was work being done, there were jobs, known as the industrial city, so it wasn't a bedroom community. What do you love about your neighborhood? What makes it unique and special? So one of the things is the diversity, then community connection. For example, Edith was saying that when her son, who has some intellectual disability, goes out of the house, she doesn't worry about him, that he's in people. Well, that's right. You always worry. I mean, that comes with being a mom. So, but she feels fairly comfortable that he's out. People in the community know him, that he's safe. And the small town feel, which was really important, that it's a walkable area, that you can walk to places. And we like the idea of some of the old businesses being retained. So what are things you like least about your neighborhood that you would like to change? The number one issue is traffic. I think people feel more and more that traffic is getting more difficult to deal with. And one of the people in our table actually had somebody plow into her coming too fast down Commercial, because people like to use that instead of the slower Grand Avenue with stop signs. So something we definitely felt that traffic needs to be better managed, and especially speeding in areas where there should not be speeding, and possibly those bumps, those traffic bumps, could slow traffic down a bit. We've also, we talked about Ed's Diner possibly closing because rent increases are being extremely high. So local businesses feel like they're forced to be moving out. So I think we should really consider that we like to make sure that it's just not, we like diversity. We don't like to have just all the newest and brightest. We like some of the old places too. The other thing that came up was that on Railroad Avenue, there are apartments, and yet one side of the street, there's no parking allowed. So that made the parking on Railroad Avenue around 400 block very, very difficult, and that there should be better planning there, and especially not letting people, there's an example of a camper that doesn't move except when it's cleaning Monday, street cleaning. So that's annoying because people who live there can't park in front of their own house. And there was a good discussion. Says cleanliness. That it used to be that the street sweepers came down the alleys, and now the street sweepers evidently are not. So that there's old furniture put out and stuff, things just being discarded and left there. So the feeling is that a lot of the low-income areas, the Latino areas, downtown areas, are being neglected as far as cleanliness goes. And the feeling is that west of El Camino, these people don't face the same issues, that people in Bury and other places don't face the issues of having junk outside and nobody picking the city not servicing those areas. And that led to the idea of actually getting maybe the engagement that exists in, say, the Latino community, somehow outreach so that their complaints can actually be brought to the right agencies in the city and something being done about that. So I think that was a good connection to make. And then what are the key issues that your neighborhood is facing? And that's when we were talking about the traffic safety, especially on Commercial. Again, some of the areas are being neglected that should be looked at better. And also I have down here, schools are better on the west side. So there's a feeling that, the west side gets maybe a little bit more attention with the school, and maybe Mr. Torres could address that a little bit too. And then imagine yourself living or working in South San Francisco in 20 years. What do you want to see in your neighborhood? Are there new services you want to see in 20 years? Well, a few of us at my table said, well, I don't know if we're going to be here at that time, but for our kids or grandkids, keep some of the old businesses still around. Now, this I think is really important. places where youth can gather, a center for teens, making sure that there are good activities, good places for teens. I know the Civic Center campus, maybe the rec department there and the library might have more going on with that. But I think because there are the Boys and Girls Club, but then that's only for a certain age group. And so I think definitely teens, and not all teens are into sports. So if there's, more. Now I noticed that Orange has the Makerspace, Orange main library has Makerspace and other programs too. And trying to get maybe more for teens would be because I think there's a good amount of teens in South San Francisco. So, and of course there's younger kids that will be teens soon. So keep that in mind. And one big thing that is very true, we talked about food deserts, and Veronica mentioned that we need more of a grocery store in this area, in the downtown area. We've got little shops, but we need something like a grocery outlet. I mean, not a huge super store, but a decent grocery store where people don't have to get in their car to drive to get groceries. That it's possible. Another thing is we had Anchor Pharmacy at one point right in the community, and now that's not so convenient for a lot of people. So it'd be nice if we had something like that. Better school preparation for jobs, especially in the tech area, and affordable housing for our kids. I mean, that's a big issue because families are seeing that the younger generation can't afford to live here, and that their kids are going to have to move away, and it's causing some real anxiety in a lot of people younger than myself, but still having kids that are young adults and not understanding where they're going to live, wants to raise their families. Okay.
Thank you so much. All right, last but not least, can we get a representative from the table in the back?
Pretty much in track with what everybody else is saying. The reason some people at our table are here, I moved to the neighborhood, was a housing opportunity, and it was affordable, and families that have been here for generations and continue to live in family homes and family neighborhoods, people born in South City, and everybody likes that it's a small town feel, and it's close to transit, and that's one of the reasons we stay. It's kind of like that. The small town and the urban crush is the way I like to say it. What do you love about your neighborhood? What makes it unique and special? It's because it is denser. We are pretty close together. I mean, it's not like the city where we're smack up to each other, but still you're 10 feet from all your neighbors, just about. And in a lot of ways, that's great because what's happening all around you at all the times. There's never a question about what's going on over there because it's pretty obvious. It's historical charm in downtown. A lot of these buildings downtown are over 100 years old, and just City Hall and the library. And I know our house is over 100 years old, and it's just cool to walk around and see the historical markers. And it's a cool little downtown. I dig it. And so does everybody else, obviously. And that we have mom and pop stores. Most of us at the table have some corner store that we go to. And it makes it really nice to just walk down and grab something that you need real quick. And that's great. Some walkability. Walkability is key. The things we like least about our neighborhood and we want to change is the density might be becoming too high for comfort. Just with so many people stacked on top of each other in a tight space with no parking. That was a big one. And need more parks, more open space. Something that came along the parking conversation was that parking enforcement needs to be more consistent. People that have 3-4 cars that they don't even drive, and they move from one side of the street to the other on street cleaning days. or they have expired tags and they're not even legal, but somehow they avoid any enforcement. So that kind of thing might help. I think people were looking for ways to maybe help, maybe some increased enforcement. We would also like more affordable housing. I know that's an issue for everybody, everywhere. And figure that the new apartment dwellers will want to buy the existing homes in the neighborhood when their families grow, and they're not going to have any opportunity to do that. The key issues in your neighborhood is facing right now, traffic and parking. That came up again. Just, it's getting more people, more cars, and less parking. Imagine yourself working in South City, working in South City in 20 years. What does everybody want to see? Get it more cleaning. There's a lot of areas that are pretty kind of overrun and could use some sprucing up. I don't know if that's landlord enforcement, code enforcement. I don't know what it is. And continuing affordability. A lot of people did move here because it's certainly a heck of a lot cheaper than San Francisco. And even though it seems like it's getting crazy, it's still cheaper than San Francisco. More open space. We wondered if there was the ability to open up the schoolyards because the schoolyards are closed down. I know every place I lived when I was a kid, you could go play in the schoolyard after school, but you can't. They're all locked up. Just make sure that there's more open space. And then the same thing came about communication of neighborhood events throughout the city, and more communication with the local residents to help bring everybody together and get together around issues and things in their neighborhood.
Great. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you again. That was fantastic. And as mentioned, you noticed that there's some key themes that keep popping up in every sub area or neighborhood we've gone into. We hear a lot of the same great things about the city, about the character, about accessibility, especially here in downtown, right? Having that walkability. I think we've heard that consistently, that kind of character that isn't necessarily anywhere else in the city, but then also maybe some of the challenges that come along with the increased housing in the area, more people living in this area with the parks, with the parking and the traffic issues potentially. Beautification has come up a lot about bringing in more parks and more places for people to gather. The town square idea, just more people for more places for the community to come together and congregate. I think that's a very common theme that we've heard throughout. So thank you again. And housing, obviously, that's always a key issue, is needing for more affordable housing and of all types, right? So that the youth that want to stay here, the younger generation and the older, can stay as long as you hopefully would like to. So with that, I want to appreciate your time. I know we're a little bit over at this point, but I'm going to quickly walk us through next steps and talk a little bit more about what we've been doing. So we've had a series of, was mentioned earlier, these citizen advisory committee meetings that represent different perspectives within the community. We've had those every month, and we'll continue to have those throughout. Those are noticed for the public to come out to as well. As part of that series, we're also going to do something exciting. We're going to do a community forum, or a series of forums that are going to cover hot topics that have come up, like housing, like transportation, like accessibility to different types of uses we want to see. The first one is going to be in October. We're targeting October 30th for that. We're going to talk about the emerging trends in mobility. So again, looking at transportation trends, looking at technology trends, that maybe the autonomous vehicles and other resources that might be available. And we're going to do that by bringing in experts from around the region to talk about some of the successes they've had in other communities. We'll bring representatives from other communities here as well, and just have an ongoing kind of dialogue with you all, so that it's not going to be at all project specific, but just to have information out there and have a dialogue with the community. We're super excited about that. We've had these sub-area meetings. I'll talk a little bit about what we've done there. Pop-up events, again, going out to the community at different events so that it's easier for you to access this information and provide feedback to us, because we know your time is valuable and we really appreciate you being here, but we also want to go out to you. We also did a series of stakeholder meetings early on, and all of this is feeding into a community-wide workshop where all of this information gathered will be brought to that meeting. We'll do interactive exercises, talk a little bit more about the visioning pieces, about what areas, again, that are important we want to preserve, what areas to improve. We're targeting November or potentially early December for that meeting. We'll definitely inform you as that comes into view about what that's going to look like. As I mentioned, we did have a series of sub-area meetings thus far. We've held 5. We have 3 more planned that's going to be coming up through September 18th. You can see the next one is going to be at Orange Park next week on the 9th. Sunshine Gardens on the 12th, Lindenville on the 18th, and Terra Bay, Paradise Valley, and Sign Hill on the 18th as well. And the idea is these sub-areas encompass every single neighborhood throughout the city. We want to give access, again, to everyone to this information. We're going to be running very similar exercises there. You're welcome to come to as many of these as you like. You're not regulated just to any one of these, but one of the opportunities to plug in. I mentioned the pop-up events. The Concerts in the Park is a great one that we know happens every year. This year on September 28th from 11 to 4:30, we'll be there literally popping up a tent and having great interactive discussion with folks. We did something similar at the Mayor's Town Hall last week, where a little bit more interactive but informal. Again, another way to go out to the community and gather information, so we hope you can make it to that as well. And then last but not least, we have the project website at shapesssf.net. And all of this information that we're gathering here at every meeting, all the summaries, the pictures, the video, that will all be posted directly to the website, so it's accessible for everybody. There's also an opportunity to provide comments on that website. There's different places where you can go ask additional questions, or if you have any concerns, you could also address it there. We have Lisa's name, who's here tonight. She's your main point of contact. If you have additional questions for her, her email address is here. Again, we want to give you as many different assets and opportunities to plug into this process. We appreciate your time, but we want to make sure we're efficient in the way we gather input. And we'll continue this series again throughout the next couple years. And thank you again very much. A big round of applause for you all for being here tonight. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the meeting. Thank you so much.